Up. It's a very tough time. Jobs are disappearing at an alarming rate. And the car industry is hanging by a thread. And so is the public trust, at least in Illinois, after Rod Blagojevich was accused of trying to sell the new president's Senate seat. That political headache adds to the huge pressures already on Barack Obama in meeting the economic crisis. But this week there are fresh signs that Americans will stick with the new president and fight off the usual divisions in our political life. That's what happened back in 1964 after the Kennedy assassination. The country was at an emotional low, and this is how Lyndon Johnson tried to overcome the gloom.
Let us now join reason to faith and action to experience, to transform our unity of interest into a unity of purpose.
Well, it worked. Americans gave him the support that led to the Civil Rights Bill and to Medicare. These days, unity in America is at an historic high. In a new NBC poll, 67% of us, that's two-thirds, said they have positive feelings toward Obama. In fact, catch this, 45% said they have very positive feelings towards Obama. Only 25% said that about George W. Bush before he was inaugurated, and only 26% said that about President Clinton. Andrea, huge support for Obama in the new NBC Wall Street Journal poll, overwhelming, in fact. Is that because things are so bad and he's the only game in town, the only hope we have?
It's a combination, but certainly the real dire straits that he's in and the feeling that Americans have that this is worse than it's been in so many decades, historically bad, creates the environment where people are willing, I think, to give him a chance and give him a longer honeymoon, more time, because the problems are so bad. 73% of those people questioned in that poll like the appointments that he's made. That's a very high number. They like the way he's handling this transition as well, similar number. So I think people are willing to, they like what he's doing so far, and they're willing to give him a break, to cut him some slack, because they know he's inheriting this, and it is so bad.
So the atmospherics are great, Gene, but what about this stink bomb coming out of Chicago? You got to call it that, with Blagojevich and trying to sell, really trying to sell on the tapes, Barack Obama's Senate seat.
Yeah, and that's, you know, big city politics, Illinois politics. It's something that Obama has to continue to distance himself from, detach himself from, and put behind him so he can move on to what are, frankly, much bigger and much more important matters. I mean, he's got to save the economy. He's got to end two wars. He's got to get the country moving in the right direction again. And there is all this goodwill about him. So I think the Illinois scandal, while it catches our attention, I think it doesn't necessarily detract from the goodwill for Obama, because in the final analysis, you have to root for the guy to succeed. You can't root for him to fail.
In terms of journalism, what you have to cover are the legs of this story big enough or strong enough to overcome this goodwill? Will it get in his way?
Well, it's possible. We'll see how the story unfolds. We'll also see if Obama's promise to come forward with details on any communications, that may sort of tamp it down, at least with respect to President-elect Obama. But I think, Chris, what this is a reminder of is that distractions can always be problematic for presidents. And whether it's a scandal or whether or not it's the India-Pakistan relationship, events, there are always going to be distractions, and it's a major challenge for any administration to walk and chew gum, as they like to say.
Yeah, Andrew, what do you think about this?
Why is it a distraction when this has nothing to do with Obama at all, except he comes from the same city? It is his Senate seat, obviously, when the actual papers that we have say that they tried something on with Obama and they could get nothing but appreciation. So I think the whole thing about this being a distraction or a terrible, unless we find out something we don't already know, the idea that that has anything to do with President-elect Obama.
Let me tell you why it's a distraction. Because the day that Obama wanted to come out and introduce Tom Daschle as his Secretary of Health and Human Services and talk about health care, a major top priority for him, the vast majority of the questions and the coverage had to do with Blagojevich, not health care.
I agree with your point about what we know so far, but here's where it becomes a distraction, or potentially. Any White House gets tied up in, well, you know, who had which call, and is there any paper trail? When the Scooter Libby thing, let me just
400 people on the transition.
When Scooter Libby happened,
Scooter Libby was committing a crime at the behest of the president.
I'm just saying that other people who were not involved had to check all their phone records, make sure that they had no phone calls from anybody peripherally connected.
The question whether this guy's got the right tuning fork. Has he come into the center too far? Has he lost some of the people on his left? Has he mollified the right too much? In these appointments, which are going over so well, does he face the risk of an attack from the left?
It depends what you mean by the left. I mean, when he's proposing a massive infusion of public spending into the economy, massive infrastructure, healthcare reform. I mean, I don't know how more left-wing the policies are supposed to be given the circumstances. The only question I think that worries many of us is how does he have a bright line between himself and the torture and war crimes of the Bush administration? How does he continue to manage the CIA, get someone at the top of the CIA who is able to do it, who is not tainted with the war crimes of the last 8 years? That's very hard. I know there's a real brewing rebellion about that if he were to compromise on that.
Some of these things he inherits. Let me ask you about the things he's going to initiate. Certainly has to inherit these problems. He clearly wants to initiate something on energy. He wants to change this economy to a greener economy. He wants to give us national health care. You and I remember this. In '64, the norm, the consensus was we need to do Medicare. The consensus was, Republican and Democrat, we got to do civil rights. Has the consensus emerged somewhere left of center for 2009?
Oh, I think the center has definitely moved. I think the center has definitely moved to the left. And I think Obama is on firm political ground in virtually all these things. I think the question is, can you do them all at the same time? Can you physically, administratively do them all at the same time so that they make sense as a suite of programs?
Cece, you're reporting on this. Can we get a big emerging health care reform measure that brings health care insurance to people that don't have it in the context of this crisis? Is it going to happen?
Not certain if they can pull it off, but there are signs that they are, A, very determined to, B, that they are moving much earlier than anybody has.
Like in 2009, like we might get it next year.
Well, efforts are already underway writing legislation up on the Senate side.
The reason is Tom Daschle and Ted Kennedy. This is Ted Kennedy's legacy, and he is absolutely fighting for it, fighting against his illness. And Tom Daschle, the reason he took HHS is that he's also the White House health care person overseeing all of this. It's a huge thing, and Cece's absolutely right with your reporting.
Prevents your enemies and your opponents from slicing each bit off and fighting wars on those little bases, the way that happened with Clinton. Remember, it took him forever to get this health care
So what protects him now?
Doing it precisely what you said, which is doing it all at once.
I agree, okay. But let me ask you this. On the right, has he mollified the right enough and have circumstances sort of pushed back the right so that he has some wiggle room on the left?
Absolutely, and I tell you why, because I think a lot of moderates, conservatives, and Republicans who were actually half bought into some of the absurd stereotypes of Obama as a crazy lefty, since the election have been, oh my goodness, this man really is a centrist.
Hey, let's take a look at what it all means now. We asked the Matthews meter, 12 of our regulars, with the tough times we have now, will Obama's support last longer than usual? Looks like it will. 11-1. This meter, represented by these people here, says yes, the tough times are going to give Obama, just because they are tough, a longer than usual honeymoon. Andrea, you agree with that? You're one of the 11.
I do, and we sort of laid it out at the beginning that there's so much support for what he's doing so far, precisely because the times are so tough. And when you've got a situation where the Republican White House is buying into bailouts. I mean, Republicans have changed more than the Democrats have.
Andrew, you agree? This is the time.
I think there will be resistance maybe in a year or a couple of years if Obama overreaches. I mean, if there is a real attempt to create a command economy from Washington in which people are picking winners and losers, then I think we're going to get, and I will be glad, actually, the right wing will begin to re-understand that its main goal is resisting government power.
Cece, last question. Will the Republicans recognize it's not their year and get out of the way?
I think for a period they will, but they're going to be on guard to see just how big that deficit keeps growing.
Gene, will the Republicans recognize it's not their year?
Yes, most of them will, and some will want to obstruct, but I don't think there are enough of them.
I think they'll want to obstruct, as they did in the initial opposition to the auto bailout. I think that they will pick and choose, and they feel somewhat resurgent with a couple of these elections, Georgia, Louisiana.
So will they obstruct or not?
I think they will.
The 20% core of them, the Palin, Hannity, Limbaugh crowd, are going to obstruct every inch of the way and go crazier and crazier in the next
3-1, they're getting out of the way. We'll be right back running the country.